Hello everybody, welcome back to the Nocturnal Gaming Network. My name is Xeriua, and today we're once again playing Spaceflight Simulator. And today we start here on the moon, where we left off in the last episode. So, last time when we were together, we did a review, a critique of a subscriber of mine's video, his, not video, but rocket and rover design. And his name's a young Aviator Dave. His stuff, his information is in the channel. Go ahead and check him out. Give him a little bit of love. He's just getting started with the game. He plays this game and he plays some Space Agency 2. So, or Space Agency also. Space Agency 2 is not a thing. I sort of wish it was, because I really enjoyed that game. Nulis, if you're listening to me, I would buy, your game. I enjoyed it very much. But anyway, back on track. So the last time we were together, we used his rocket. We did a critique. We sent his little rover here to space, to the moon. We landed it on the moon with the rest of my garbage that I've launched and sort of stranded here in some cases. Now, it inspired me. It inspired me to do my own rocket that, is basically going to take some of the things I talked about and it's going to incorporate them. So this is going to be basically the same mission, but instead of using his rocket, we are going to build our own. So let's talk about what I want here. I want to do a rocket that goes to the moon. Okay, and I'm going to basically use his design for a rover. So the little, let's call it cigar-shaped rover, and then I'm going to put a little teeny tiny, some sort of module on it, right? I'm gonna put a little, let's call it a UAV, right? UAVs are a big thing today, and then we're going to have the landing module that's used to land it, and we're going to have the rocket. So let's get started here. And as with most of my builds, I like just starting the fairing out. That gives me a little bit of an idea of how I actually want to get this thing set up. And we're gonna go and grab the stuff for the rover. Boom. Boom, here's the rover. I'm going to add RCS thrusters like I discussed. We need 3 of these little wheels. And we need some solar panels and some utility pieces. So solar panel 1, solar panel 2, and we need not that one, but this one. Alright, so let's see. I want to put the wheels in here. And I'm going to set them up something like this. I don't know exactly where they want to be yet, but I know that this wants to be about here. And we can put that right there. So now we've got the base from which we will build the rest of our stuff here. Now, if you put the rover in place before the fairing, you may have trouble connecting this piece up right here because of the wheel. Just remove the wheel, connect it up, and then throw the wheel back in there. I've discussed that on some of my other videos, but if people haven't seen those, I want to make sure I add that tip right here. There we go. So now we are going to work on the rover and the solar panels. So here we are. This is my rover. Here's the solar panels. Now, there we go. What we're going to do is we're going to put a connection for our little drone. We're going to put it right here on top. So now we need to start building the drone itself. And we're going to use some of these electric thrusters. Okay? And, remember, low thrust. We're not going to use solar panels on this. We're going to not have a battery either because we don't really have the space. I want to try and make this, fit in a fairing. So we're not. This is going to be a strange craft for me because I sort of like to usually include other stuff, but we're going to put just this little fuel tank right here. We need a probe core, and then we are going to put that right there, just like that. And this is what's going to connect it in. Now, we need something to give ourselves power for the ion engine. So we're going to use these RTGs. We're going to put them right there, and then we are going to grab some RCS thrusters. I'm going to put them right there, centered around the center of gravity of this thing, which is literally right there, because it's a nice, evenly set up craft. We don't have too much to worry about. Now, let's work on the landing craft itself. We're going to do something similar to our lunar rescue mission we did, where we put basically this assembly, right, around the craft. Something like this, so that we can connect into the into the module here. And we're going to put this cage going down on either side of it. And then we're going to go back to basic, and we're going to put one of these right here and one of these right here. So these are evenly distributed. They are fuel tanks. They are literally just here to provide a little tiny bit of extra fuel. Want to rotate these around. We're going to put 2 RCS thrusters here and 1 RCS thruster there. So this is a pod. The entire point of this pod is to provide some balanced thrust for when we're landing on the not the planet, because we're landing on the moon in this case. And it's, come on, I broke it. I'm gonna have to pull this wheel out. See, this is the only trouble with the fairing, doing the fairing first like this, is things don't like to always sit. Okay, I need to pop that one out of there. Oh, no, it's not that one. It's this one that's causing the problem. There it is, and there's that. And oh, boy. Okay, so this is done. We've got our pod. Now, notice we do not have anything other than the one docking port that's connecting this little drone to the ship. If we were to put, say, one more block right here, or up here, what that's going to do is it's actually going to make these 2 modules just one because of how they're connected. So when you hit your docking port down here, it's not actually going to work, and you'll never be able to separate these. So this is basically the ship, the drop ship completed. What we're going to do now is we're going to go over and grab one of these. We're going to stick it right here. And we want to put 2 of these just like this. Now, we can grab another probe core, and we can go to basic and begin to assemble the dropship. I like the broadsword, so there's a broadsword, and we're going to put some RCS thrusters on this thing because we want to keep the thrust even, or thrust as even as we can, and specifically we care about it being even when we're trying to drop this thing. After the fact, once we're done with the drop, it doesn't matter so much because we're not going to be using as much thrust, and we're probably just going to put it out of the way and park it somewhere and leave it. So, that's fine. We may even, blow it up. Depends on how much fuel's left in it. Now, this drop vehicle, okay, the main engine has more than enough thrust to actually land us on the moon. The RCS thrusters, that we shouldn't really touch any of the RCS fuel to actually land on the moon. So I've included these two extra tanks, this one here and this one up here, just because if other people are playing along with this, I wanted a little extra fuel for people, so it wasn't super hard to go through and land this. And we're going to enclose this now, because this is our payload. Something like this. Now, we want to just cover up the thrusters and lock into the fairing. There we are. So here's our actual payload, let's call it. And the payload is, 84 tons. So to make this have a nice, basically even appropriate amount of thrust when it's actually heading towards the moon, we're going to need two broadswords here. So we're going to do the staggered design here, where we've got the one fuel tank connecting the other ones, and that will lock it all together and, hopefully make it work nice. We're just going to put some not fairings, but nose cones on this thing to make it look a little better, because I like my rockets to aesthetically look good also. We can't have ugly rockets. That defeats the whole purpose of these things, right? We're spending millions and millions of dollars sending them to space. They have to be functional, but they better look cool. So here is a secondary stage, and this is going to complete our circularization and head us towards the moon. Come on, get on there. Now, one thing I wish, because currently you have to use two separators like this when you have the small stage, I wish you could go to like the big parts and use either, that one's not big enough anyway, but use like this right here, the 8 block module, and have this fairing correctly attached to this, but it does not, or I would be using the bigger one. But whatever, we'll just have to hit two little buttons instead of one. So next we're going to use the triple rocket, well, quad rocket in this case that I like. So we do three tanks of fuel, and that gives us enough fuel here to actually launch the rocket, make a nice orbit around the planet. And we're going to build it out and put 3 more tanks. Okay, and then in this case, we're actually going to need additional fuel. So I'm going to put 3 tanks up here in reserve, plus a nose cone and a separator. And the same thing over here, 1, 2, 3, nose cone, right there is good enough, and separator. Okay, so now we can put our thrusters, and we're just going to use some Hawk engines for this main stage here. And then we need to go to aerodynamic. We will put a couple more of these nose cones. There we go. And then go to our big parts. And what we're going to do is we're going to put Titan booster engines here. And we're going to use these Titans to just get us off the ground, get us up into the air. And once we're in the air on our way to space, then we should have enough thrust to actually launch this thing. And well, if I remove these real quick, the reason we have to have those boosters is because currently, like this, our thrust to weight ratio is 0.98, so this rocket wouldn't actually get us anywhere. And remember, when I'm designing this, I'm adding stages, I'm adding stuff, I'm looking at the mass and the thrust to weight, and I'm using that to judge what else I need to add. So let's add our stuff back here. Come on, 1 more, 2 more? Yeah, that's it. So what I like doing is I like centering roughly my separator on the modules, because these modules, when you use the separator to separate the boosters from the rocket, it pushes it out a little bit, and I would rather that it push the entire thing sideways instead of when it pushes one side or the other and adds a rotation to this booster. I don't want the booster to rotate. I just want it to separate from the main body of the rocket. So here we go. So right about there. And this is my rocket that I'll be using to send my monstrosity here that I'm basing on a subscriber's rocket into space. And I do admit that I've made this simple little rover quite a bit more complex. But that's not the point here. Yeah, so our final thrust to weight was like 1.7, but the mass was 626.8 tons, if I'm remembering those numbers correctly. I'm probably pretty close. So we can't just use our boosters to launch. We're actually going to need to use all of our thrusters in the primary stage and the boosters. So here's my thumbnail. There we go. And we're just going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And when I have bunches of rockets, I like to just verify that they're on. Because, you know, we wouldn't want to make a mistake now, would we? Now, one thing I've noticed is, for whatever reason, it seems to want to flip this little designator sideways, and I'm not sure why it's doing that. It seems like it's got something to do with the order you put the probe cores. It's like the probe cores take priority over the crew capsules, but I really don't know or understand why it's going to want to flip it sideways like this, but it does. And, well, in some cases we can basically go back to build and, you know, go back out, and maybe it'll fix it for us. No, it didn't fix it for us this time. Maybe we can try removing that and adding a new one, because it is that module right there that's causing the problem. And it's probably going to do with the order we add them. There it is. Okay, so this is better for most people. That way your rocket's facing the right way. So we're just going to do the same thing again. We're going to make sure all of our engines are on. Alright, there it is. We're ready to go. And where is the moon? The moon is over there. So I'm going to have to go a long ways, huh? Let's let it go a little further here. That way I can try and make a better connection with the moon. Something like this right here. That's probably good. Now, somewhere around this area is where we'd want the moon if we're going to do like a direct launch to it, but I'm not getting that technical this time. We just want it over in this area so we can launch this thing properly, and we're ready to go. Going to go back to 100% fuel. Boom, or 100% throttle, rather. And we have a very high thrust to weight ratio right at the beginning here, but it's actually going to drop off fairly quickly because remember we have these boosters that we're using that are going to go away. So we're going to want to start our gravity turn, and we're going to want to be, 60 degrees-ish at the 5,000 meters, but we want to make sure we get that before we run out of thrust in the booster stage. So there's 5,000. Want to make sure that we just get to the 60. So right about there's probably good. We need to stage. I like to stage with my engines off. There we are. See how it didn't have that much rotation in those? Did have a little, but that's okay. So now we need to just basically keep riding this thing until we raise our apoapsis and we get out into orbit. I didn't actually set the moon as my target, did I? No, I didn't. So let's do that. Let's set it as a target right now while we're just sort of waiting. Alright, so here we go. We are creeping up on our apoapsis, but that's okay. We're just going to stay right at this angle, and eventually our apoapsis is going to get pushed ahead of us because we're speeding up enough. And, you know, we can start turning in back to the prograde, and, well, basically it's going to keep raising our apoapsis here. And we want our apoapsis to be pretty close to space. It doesn't have to be 100% in space, but it needs to be pretty close. Alright, so now we're out of fuel. Let's stage ourselves. Remember, when you have multiple engines like that, you really do want to take your time and stop your thrust. Just turn it off, because if you don't, what's going to happen is you're going to start applying rotation to the rocket by only having one thruster. And it's, I guess, not going to be that bad where the rocket's boosters are so close to the center line of the rocket in this case. But, you know, it is going to happen. Pop our fairing. There we go. Now we can boost again. And we only have a couple hundred more, 100 more meters per second-ish to go, which is good. Now, we want to wait something like this, and we can just angle ourselves at approximately the correct angle. We'll fast forward in time. We don't need to fully circularize here because of where our escape, marker is to actually hit an encounter with the moon. We can just go there, get right on the area, and then burn again, and that's going to raise our periaps and eventually switch over to our apoaps. And we want to be right on the little gray area this time rather than trying to lead it, because, you know, we want it. We're not going to be burning that much here. We just want something. And we're going to use up most of the rest of our fuel here. We're going to leave a little bit so we can do a maneuver to actually drop these thrusters, so we don't leave clutter in space. Right about there, that's perfect. That's a perfect amount of fuel. We are going to go to the apoaps at about 1,000 kilometers. We don't want to raise our apoaps too high, or else it'll take a long time to go around our orbit and get back to the area. So just be aware of that. Make sure your engines are off. We can stage. Ooh. Well, that was stupid. I should have turned the rocket around before I staged, because we're going to need to head back this way. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to start by burning radial in or radial out. Doesn't really matter. And then we can just burn with low thrust, something like that. That will get us clear of the other module, and then we can turn prograde. Make sure we've cleared it. We have cleared it, and now we can just burn prograde, and that will raise our periaps once again. We just want to make sure the periaps is, it just has to be very, very minimally out of the atmosphere, because we don't want to be losing speed while we're trying to do this. Okay, so let's rotate approximately to the correct angle. I can't even use my words. And we'll just accelerate time. Remember, you speed up as you head back towards the planet, so don't go too fast. Don't, overshoot. And basically what we want to do is we want to lead the gray area by just a little bit. So maybe something like that. That's probably fine, because we're already quite far on our apoaps. So we're going to, we're not going to need that much time, basically, going around the planet before we are just shooting our apoaps out into space and we make our encounter with the moon. So we don't really need to lead it that far. So I guess now we just wait And there's the moon approach. We're close enough, it's actually giving us an approach marker. And we just wait a little longer, slow our throttle down, and we're ready to make connection with the moon. There we are, there's our encounter. Now we can zoom in. We probably want a nice low orbit of, I don't know, 10 kilometers. Now, again, related to my last video on young Aviator Dave's rocket here, notice how much easier it is with the lower thrust to just get a nice gentle adjustment, and there we are at basically exactly 10 kilometers. Just first try, no adjustment, no RCS, no anything. So we can just accelerate in time here, and we are going to leave the planet, leave our home, and we can follow this, and we'll just head to the moon. It's no big deal. We got this. We have the technology. So here we are. We can now begin the next step, which, by now I've done this a couple times, so if you're watching all my videos, you will already know how I'm going to do this. I'm going to preemptively rotate and then kill my kill my speed, so I make circularization around the moon, and then we're going to, land in the same area. So here we are. That's about the right rotation. Throttle all the way up. Now, this module here actually has too much fuel in it. This one right here that I'm using as a transfer module, the third stage. So there's plenty of room for error if you aren't quite as experienced with the game, if you want to try this. Also, like I said, the same thing with the landing stage. There's plenty of fuel in the actual landing module to do the landing, and then there's some extra fuel for the RCS thrusters afterwards, and then you should be able to refuel both the both the drone and the rover itself once you're done here. So let's begin to slow ourselves down right about here. We can be basically at periaps because we want to actually land on the opposite side of the moon, so we're going to have to go around the moon no matter what. So it doesn't really matter too much what we do here. We just need to make orbit around the moon, slow ourselves down enough that we make orbit around the moon. And we're almost there. Make sure you're not lowering your periaps too much when you're doing this. Alright, that's probably pretty good right there. Periaps of 8. Okay. So see how much fuel we have left? We literally have so much fuel. We're gonna go to probably about here, about 9 o'clock on the moon, and we're going to use this module to lower our periaps into the planet. And we're actually going to go into the planet here. We're going to make sure that we do, because this is, you know what? Hold on. We're gonna raise our periaps a little bit because we want to ditch this, and then we want to get ready for. There we go. We don't want to hit the 5,000 kilometer mark, or 5,000 meter mark, because that will kill our ability to time warp, and we don't want to do that. So there we are. Now we can go through and separate this. Like I said, we got plenty of fuel, and we are going to turn this engine on, and we are going to get ready to actually make landing. We're going to go over here. We're going to wait till about 12 o'clock relative to the moon. So something like this right here, that's about 12 o'clock. That's pretty close. So now we are going to follow this. We're going to kill our horizontal momentum, and this will allow us to gently make our way into the moon here. And I'm just going to kill my momentum, my sideways momentum, to the point where my trajectory is basically exactly where I want to land in this case. But, you know, depending on what you're doing, you might want to lower it and then lower it again and actually fine-tune your adjustment a little more. So we're going to time warp. We can't really go that far, but yeah, what we want to do is burn up, so a little bit radial out relative to the planet, and that will allow us to slow ourselves down while not actually changing our trajectory that much if we're doing it right. And we can just go side to side, and that will, you know, basically keep us on target. And we don't have as much thrust as we did in the last episode, so we want to make sure we're keeping an eye on our speed and our height, because we want to be at about 40 meters per second when we reach 2,000 meters. That's, you know, a nice safe number that I've come up with. It's not a hard number by any means. That's just what I like to do here. So let's go with like 30% thrust here. That way we can keep ourselves a little lower in speed here. Like I said, you should have plenty of fuel to do this, so don't worry that much. Obviously, you don't want to be going, you know, wild on the fuel, but you should be fine. So there we are, we're at 50. And we can start slowing down even more here, because now we're actually at the height off the terrain. That's your big clue there, height off terrain, that you want to really start thinking about slowing this thing down. We're actually going to turn RCS thrusters on. Oh no, I just noticed I made a boo-boo. Look at this, my RCS thrusters aren't even balanced. Oh dear, how can I teach people when I can't even make something that looks nice? Alright, here we go. So we want to begin slowing down. We're at about 1,000 meters, so we want to slow down to maybe about 20 meters per second, and at like 1,000 meters you probably want to start checking the ship view itself to make sure that you are, you know, that everything's going right and you actually know how close to the ground you are, because it's a little hard to judge how close to the ground you are when you're only using the map view, basically. So one thing you'll notice, if we just use up on the RCS thrusters, the RCS thrusters by themselves are enough to slow this ship down. So, you know, worst case scenario, you may or may not be able to use the RCS thrusters to help yourself out in in the event of an emergency, but it's probably good not to rely on them too much, because it's going to take a while for them to stop you. So if we just slowly get ourselves to a nice hover, we can use the RCS thrusters to make ourselves head over towards the ship. Alright, and we are still going down, because you see how our velocity is actually slowing. There we go. We've almost... Oh, we're going back up. We don't want to go up. So something like that's probably pretty good right there. And we just want to make sure that we get nicely in this little crater here. Something like this. And we'll use the RCS right at the end. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. There we go. There we go. Slow our sideways momentum. I didn't actually do that. Alright. So now we are ready to launch this little rocket and set the rover down. So we're going to RCS to puff ourselves up, rotate it, and then remember the RCS thrusters, the orientation changes with the orientation of the rocket. So we can just very, very gently set ourselves down like this. We're going to come over here and we're going to take this fuel and stick some more of it in here and a little more of it in there. And, you know, basically we're done with this thing. Now, one thing I didn't really think of that I probably should have, if I had put the module, the docking module on the strut and faced it out, I actually could have landed on it with this little drone here and sucked some more of the fuel out of the tanks for this thing. But I didn't think about that. That's something that you can do if you try this. So basically what we want to do now, we're just going to disconnect. We should stay in control of this. And we're just going to move this thing over somewhere, like over here. There we go, with all the rest of our garbage that we are littering this pristine lunar surface with. And then set it down very gently. There we go. There we go. So that's all set down. So now switch, zoom in on the map, and switch to the rover. So the rover here has solar panels and RTGs, but it doesn't have batteries. So what you'll notice is you actually use what's going on here? You actually use power faster than the RTGs can replenish it with the 3 wheels here. So, you know, we can make our move, we can sort of go over here like this. We could, you know, do whatever, zoom around the planet with this little thing. But we're not going to. That takes a while because rovers on the moon, where they're so light and the gravity's so small that it's just a pain to drive them. So I'm not going to do that and make people sit through it. You can do that if you want, but that's up to you. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to make sure this thing is really roughly level, and then we're going to try out our little toy here, our little drone, right? Boom. So we are in control of the drone. And, whoa, that was sort of sketchy. What we're going to do is turn the engines on, and we don't need very much thrust to get this thing off the ground. Also, with these engines, we want to keep it below 50% thrust, or we're actually going to run out of power. So, here we are. 11% thrust isn't enough to launch us. Oh, actually it might be. Hold on, let's go back to 11%. We need to separate ourselves again. There we go. So no it isn't. We need roughly, okay, there we go. So we need roughly 40% thrust. So we can go to 59. There we go. See how we're draining our fuel. 41 isn't. There we go. And we want to just pilot this thing very, very carefully here if we want to use these electric engines. You know, slow and steady wins the race in this case. And if we stay somewhere between like 30 and say 40, we should be pretty good, and you can just drive it like a helicopter. Tilt it to one side or another to make it move in a certain direction at least. There we go. So we also do have the RCS thrusters on it for emergency cases. We probably shouldn't use them all the time because they are going to eat through the fuel actually quite fast. So this works. I have confirmed that. Take that, haters. Now we're just going to land it again onto the rover. Something like this. So it seems like 37 is the perfect amount of thrust to keep ourselves in a hover. Oop, I bumped it. Alright, enough playing. What we're going to do is we're going to use RCS thrusters. And we're, oh dear, slow down. Slow down there. Alright. Alright, we need to get this thing under control. Oh, there we go. There we go. Here we go. So, 38. Okay, there we go. We've got it under control now. Now we're just going to use our RCS thrusters, short little bursts, and that will allow us to very finely control this thing. There we go. And cut the engines. Turn our RCS thrusters. We should check. Can our RCS thrusters, our 4 RCS thrusters, work? Oh no, I was wrong. 4 RCS thrusters are not enough to lift this. I thought they would be. Oh, that's a shame. Can the RCS thrusters alone lift this thing? Yes, so the RCS thrusters are capable of lifting this little module, but the 4 are not capable of lifting this rocket. Now, if we use the electric at 100% power, okay, so we would need our solar panels here to do this, and even at 100%, even with the solar panels at 100% power, we can't, so we would need RCS and the electric thrusters, but we can actually lift this thing. Interesting. And if we just keep it level and use the RCS thrusters, oh, that's good. That's great. Okay, so I guess that's enough playing around with this for now. Let's turn this off, we'll let it recharge, and maybe we'll see this at some point in the future. And this is a mission inspired by a subscriber of mine who I've been talking with. His name's Young80 Aviator Dave. Like I said, his stuff's in the description. Go ahead and check him out. That's the end of this mission to the moon with a big rover and a little, little drone. So thank you all so much for watching. My name's Xeriua, and this is the Nocturnal Gaming Network bringing you Spaceflight Simulator. Have yourselves a wonderful night, everybody.